Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're so excited for you to be here, and we're going to give you a couple of minutes to get adjusted and let everybody in. Don't forget, if you could please, to really help us out by subscribing below and give us a thumbs up and a happiness. And if you could put where you're coming from in the chat, that's always so fun to see how many people are from so many different parts of the world. We've got an incredible show. I'm super happy because I do know the speaker, Susan, and she. It's going to be great. She's going to blow your mind. She's what I call wicked smart. So we're going to have a wonderful time. And Florida, nice and warm. And as you see, if you're a regular with us, Kathy is not with us today. She had an impromptu event, and so she asked me to be on. And my name is Kimberly Melton, and my company is Visual Story Media. I am from Charlotte, North Carolina, but also help people all over the world with theirs, just like Susan. And I'm so glad to be here today because I know I'm going to learn a little bit too. Oh, Arkansas, cool. Excellent. Oh, look at this Germany. Isn't that great? Oh, upstate. So Brian knows where Charlotte is. I bet he's been up here before. Yeah, my daughter spent 2 years in Germany in college. And I went to visit her there. So she was in Frankfurt. So know a little bit about that. And we traveled for backpacked, 2 weeks across the United States. So let me also say that you are going to be able to ask plenty of questions. So you can definitely put those in the chat. And yeah. Oh, Scotland. Excellent. Well, welcome, Anne. We're so glad you're here. I have some friends moving to Ireland next year. So, Kansas. Wow, we've got a great crowd. All righty. I think we're probably live enough to get started and making sure that we've got some people. Yeah, it's buffering. So that's the reason why. Let me go ahead and introduce, as I said, my wicked friend, Susan, because she is so smart. She is a certified photo manager and a Malio certified consultant, and she's going to explain what all that means. She retired in 2022, and I was fortunate enough to meet her when she was deciding if the photo managers was even what she wanted to do. And we're very glad she decided to do it. She's a webmaster. She has been in project management, and her focus is really on helping people and businesses get their photos organized. So without further ado, I am going to introduce Susan. Now, please remember, put anything you need to know, put your questions and stuff in the chat so that we can answer them at the end, and there'll be plenty of time for questions. And if you are having problems with the spinning, just read those messages because some people have given some suggestions. Hi, welcome, Susan.
Hi, Kimberly. Thank you so much. I am so honored to be here with you and share this important topic.
Absolutely. So I'm going to dash off to give you the full screen so everybody can see your beautiful face, and I'll be back on to help with the questions.
Yeah, keep track of those, and I will give my presentation, and we'll have time at the end for questions.
Excellent. All right. See you in a few.
All right. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Hi, everybody. All right, let's get started. So I'm going to stay on this screen a little bit because some of my background is relevant in explaining what metadata is. I got started in my government career. I worked for local government, which means the city I live in. And I started with them in '98, and I was immediately asked to figure out what software that the city could use to manage their records. Back then, it was mostly paper records, so we were having to scan in ordinances and resolutions and all sorts of documents, including maps and whatnot. And my goal was not only to find a software tool that would hold and manage this, but we had to figure out back then what how to put the information, get those scans into the system, and more importantly, how could we search that system to get the information back out? So, you've heard the term garbage in, garbage out. I certainly didn't want that to happen. So I had to come up with policies and procedures and operating, guides and whatnot, so that anybody who in their own departments and divisions were adding content to this digital asset management system or document management system, that we were still following the same rules. Later, I used those same concepts when I was building and managing the website for the city, as well as personal projects for other clients that I did on the side. So when you think about, metadata, it's, and we're looking at photos, it's to help you identify the photo. And so the purpose of this session is to help you get a handle on organizing and managing your library by using metadata and using it efficiently. So it's crucial that we document what is happening with those photos in our library. So even with the advent of AI, which can help certainly, what is going to go along with that file as it moves from one library or one person to another person is the data that you save along with that file. So whether you have 5,000 or 150,000 photos in your library, it's about the information that goes along with that file that's going to be the most valuable in the long term. So how did we used to do this? Well, many of you might have these old photo albums that people would put the little photo corners on, and they'd glue them onto a page. And then somebody would take a pen, and in this example, the photo there is indicating that there's several photos from Miami Beach from May of 1942. So that really gives context immediately to what's going on in those photos. Now, some people might have written the notes of who's on these photos on the back, especially if you were having to send them in the mail back then. Some people wrote on the front of the photo, which is a very bad idea. Some people have written on slide mounts. Many of the clients, when I'm working with 35 millimeter slides and digitizing them, I see their handwriting on the tiny little slide mount. And they want me to capture that information and add it to the photo. And then, so that's how we used to do it with physical photos. But now what do you do with digital? How do you handle this capturing of all the information about what's going on in a photo and who's there? Many times when people receive a collection from relatives or their parents after they hand it down, if your parents have since passed, oftentimes you're left with photos of individuals you have no clue about. So to stop that from happening in the future and getting this documented, metadata is going to be key, and getting an understanding of how to do it right. So if you don't do it right, you can lose that. So if you spend a lot of time and you think you're adding the metadata to an image, and by correctly, I mean embedding it, which means saving that metadata to the file, then that data goes along with the file wherever that file goes. If you don't do it right, you're, of course, wasting a lot of time and effort. So we don't want that to happen. So hopefully this presentation will help guide you on the do's and don'ts. So let's start at the beginning. What is metadata? So metadata is basically data about data. So if you've got a digital photo, and many of us do right in our pocket now, because our phones, our cell phones, mobile phones can take photos and capture information. And it's capturing more than just taking a photo. And it's capturing the date it was created. Oftentimes it's capturing what kind of camera took that photo. Sometimes it's capturing the type of lens that was used, whether it was the front of the lens or the back camera, the front camera or the back camera. And what it doesn't collect is the stuff that we're going to talk about that can add context to those photos. So some of the data is stored with the file automatically when it's digitized, and that might not be correct. So if you're scanning photos and the scanner names it image 123 and it sets a date and time stamp to it, it's the date and time that the photo is scanned, not necessarily when the photo was purportedly taken. So you'll want to update that, right? And even if you don't know the exact date and time down to the minute, it's good to get at least a year and come up with like 12 noon on that day. Whether it's February 1st, you pick in general for your library to set that date, or if it's Easter in that year, you can always do Google search and figure out when Easter was that year, or if it was a particular holiday or a special occasion. Oftentimes somebody's going to remember when that occasion happened. And so that's when you want to edit that metadata and fix the date created. So another example, if I'll give you another analogy, is if you use a search engine like Google. So typically you put in 1, 2, 3 word combination into the search bar, and you hope that Google's going to return the results that match the words that you put into that search. That's the same thing that you're doing with your library. Once you put metadata in, you can put keywords back into the search, and hopefully the program will render those images that match those keywords that you added to those images. That's it basically in a nutshell. There are different types of metadata. So there are different standards. One of the longest known use of metadata has been what's called IPTC, and that's the administrative data about the image. And many professional photographers and news organizations will use that, and they use it so that the photographer can keep their copyright on the image. They too can add their personal information, such as their location where they live. They can add a headline or title. They can also put it into different categories. And so if you're a professional photographer, you know this very well. The other area is what we call EXIF data. And this is a different set of fields in photo management software that allow you to see the capture date and time, perhaps location via GPS. And at that point, when you're looking at those fields, if you look at the image on the bottom right there, at the end, you'll see the make and model of the camera that I used to take the picture of the kittens. And that photo was taken back in 2004. And so that is the original EXIF data of that image taken way back in 2004. Now, when it says date and time digitized, that could mean that image was modified in some way or shape or way. And so then it captures whatever, updates that you make to that file. It'll also give you the ISO rating, the exposure. It's very detailed. But you can also, that particular camera, the Kodak DX3500 back in the day, it did not do any GPS references. It did not track, where the photo was taken. Now, I happen to know where that photo was taken. It was taken in my previous home. And so if I wanted to figure out the longitude and latitude of that image, I could then go back into this group of photos and I could add that location data to it. So that's awesome. You can also add your caption there, and keywords is a separate field typically, which you see in the above right area. Now, XMP is often heard, and this is a separate file, often called a sidecar file in Lightroom. And so whenever you have images such as a raw file, and you make some edits to it, and you're using a program, I'll just give you an example, like Lightroom. Lightroom is a non-destructive photo editing software. So the edits that are happening on that raw file go into a sidecar file or an XMP file. Now, if you want that XMP file to go away, you have to export those files out of Lightroom to a single JPEG format, and then it will combine all that data into the JPEG file. So that's a lot of technical information there that I just handed you, but in general, XMP files should not be deleted because that keeps track of what you've done with that image, especially if it's not already embedded into the original file. So when you take photos from a digital camera like your cell phone, again, just repeating this somewhat, that, you know, the image on the right will tell you what is captured by the camera. Again, the date it was created, the device make and model. And you'll notice that between software programs, oftentimes they don't name the fields of data the same way, and that can be confusing. So in the previous example, you'll see that it said make and model. It alludes to the camera. And then in my Finder, so I'm on a Mac and I am looking at the get info in a particular file, you'll see under the more drop down here, it actually says device make and device model. So it's still make and model. The field names are slightly different and they appear in a different order. So this can include, again, camera settings, location, and a time the photo was taken. So you might be thinking, well, which software program should I use to manage all my metadata? So there are quite a few, and I am familiar in both Windows and Mac operating systems. I've been involved in both of them for many, many years. And so many of the photo programs here listed, with the exception of Apple Photos, you can actually, and I believe Graphic Converter is also a Mac app that I hadn't even thought to look at. But anyway, Apple Photos and Graphic Converter may be Mac only. If there's somebody out there that's another photo manager and can research that quickly for me, then that will help me answer that question. But all the rest of them they work great on both platforms, meaning you can get Adobe Bridge or Photoshop Elements or Lightroom Classic or Mylio or Photo Mechanic for both Mac and PC. Now, both of these offer a variety of ways for you to add, edit, and manage your library collection with managing and seeing all of the keywords that you have for your collection. So I highly recommend that if you're going to be working with your library and you want to get it managed in top, tip-top shape, then you might need to upgrade the software that you're using in order to accomplish that. So again, depending on the app, they can offer anywhere from a minimum to an advanced tagging, facial recognition, ratings, and keyword search options for you, so that you can get the most out of your library. Now, on a Windows Microsoft computer, and you open up Windows Explorer, there is a way for you to see and actually manage some of your metadata through Windows Explorer. Now, you will have to make a few changes in order to do this. So the first thing is when you open up Windows Explorer, you're going to want to change the view to a detailed list or small icon view, which is the view that you see in the screenshot here. Then the tricky part is where the headings are, where you see, in this particular view, you don't see the headings. So you would want to go to the list view first and right click and add a heading called tags. And then regardless of the view, you should see a column with the tags here showing up, and you see it right here. And then how you can search your tags, you have to indicate to Windows what field of information first that you want to search on. So it's the tag field, and you're going to hit colon, and then you can put in the keyword that you want to search on. And in this case, it's one of my cats. Her name was Khaki. Now, you can see it highlighted, and I didn't do that highlighting, Windows did. So that's kind of cool. So that's one way for you to see, if you don't have any of these other programs on your computer currently, you can see your keywords. Now, there are some built-in features on your phones that you can interact with. So whether it's an iPhone or an Android, the one thing you can't do, and Kimberly and I were having this conversation, we don't understand why, but you cannot add keywords on your phone. So if you're in the Apple Photos app, or you're in Google Photos, or I don't know if you're using a Samsung phone. I know some I can't say that. Samsung phones have a photo app. You cannot typically add keywords to your photos in those apps. You have to do it on a desktop app. So that's why those other programs I recommended are our go-to apps to do this. You can, however, adjust a creation date. You can add a caption. You can add people and location to it. And if the information that comes up in those images is incorrect, you can adjust them in those apps as well. So these two slides are basically the same. They're just two different screenshots, one showing Apple Photos and this screenshot here showing Google Photos. Now, I have both phones. For my business, I use a Google Pixel phone, and for my personal life, I have an iPhone. So I'm very familiar in both devices as well. So again, you can't add keywords here, but you can edit a lot of the other information on those phones. Now, Lightroom has to be one of my top go-to programs that I use when I'm digitizing people's collection or managing a digital photo organizing project for clients. And one of the biggest things that I like about Lightroom is this metadata pull down option here. So you'll see at the top on the screen on the right there, metadata is highlighted right here. And when I click on that in my collection and I have selected a folder, I can then get the dates that I want, and I can change each of these column headings by clicking on this little, it's very hard to see. There's 3 hash marks there, and there's a pull down, and I can change this and pick a date. So these images I know were photographed or taken in December of 2004. And then I can have a next column which narrows down all of the keywords. So if there were other photos that I took that day that have different keywords, I can narrow it down to show me just the cats. And then if they were rated or I added a label to it, I can also filter out that and give me the results that I want. So this is really helpful when I'm organizing other people's catalogs, whether they're digital images that I'm sent or I'm creating the digital images. It really helps me to figure out where I'm at with my photo collection. So again, you can sort by date. You can pull up pictures from a specific time. You can do location. You can your first column could even be keywords, so you could pull up everything. So the order in which these columns appear are the order in which help you get the information out of your library. So before you get going and you dive into this, you're like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing since sliced bread. So here's some tips to be aware of and to realize that you got to create a plan. And I know a lot of us just like to jump in and figure things out as we go along, but I'm going to share some do's and don'ts along the way, and hopefully this will prevent some pain points that you might have. Certainly I have had my own pain points, which is one of the other reasons that actually got me into even knowing that the Photo Managers Association existed, because I had a lot of dupes in my own collection and was trying to figure out how to deal with them. So be clear why you're adding the metadata. Choose a program and then learn that software. So you don't want to bounce around to different programs because you're just going to add to your own chaos and confusion. try and figure out which program you think is going to work best for the operating system that you have and the devices that you have that you want to interact with that library. So for example, if you're an all Apple user, it's kind of a no-brainer that maybe Apple Photos library or the Apple Photo program is your go-to option. Now, what happens if you're on a Windows computer, but you have an iPhone? Well, that's when, if you were my client, I'd probably recommend something like Mylio because it's cross-platform friendly. If you're a professional photographer and maybe your catalog's over 100,000 images, you might be the power user and you prefer to use Lightroom, which is great. Lightroom Classic is your desktop version of Lightroom, and they also have Lightroom, which is the cloud version. So Lightroom Cloud would give you the option to then edit and manage some of your metadata on your phone. Also, ensure that the data is being embedded into your files. Test it out. Take a small group of those images, add some metadata to it, and then try and search for them in that program and make sure that when you search for them, those images come back to you as a result. You might want to export them out of that library and see if those keywords stay with the file. Now, some programs will allow you to strip that data away, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Document what keywords you plan to use in your library or your catalog. So they call that a taxonomy. So once you determine what are your main keywords, plan to be consistent. If you're not consistent, and I mean even in capitalizing your keywords. Now, keywords do not need to be capitalized, but you'll see in my example on the right in the screenshot that animals, the letter A is capitalized, cats, the letter C. So I like to capitalize the first letter of my keywords. Now, if I had a keyword where animals was not capitalized, I believe that would be coming into my system as another keyword. Certainly, if I did not make it plural, that would be seen upon by the app as a separate keyword. So you don't want to start out with animal and then decide, oh, I like to use animals better. This is what I mean about staying consistent. Now, some of the things to determine, like what do you need to document about these photos in your library? So what you want to do is look at the who, what, when, and where to get started. These are the most common questions people have about images. So, the date created, often this is automatic unless it's scanned. The headline or title, and again, different programs call this field a different name. So the field name is different. The purpose of it is generally the same, but as it will appear differently in different apps. Caption is often used versus description. Hang on, I'm just going to grab a sip of coffee here. Location fields. This is also automatic if you've got a camera that has GPS capabilities or a phone where you have allowed the camera app to use the GPS. If you don't turn on that GPS option, meaning allow location to be tracked, then the images that you take will not capture the GPS. So if this is important to you, and I usually make sure it's turned on when I travel, because I love to see on a map when I get back and I open up one of these software programs, I love to see all the locations around the world that I've been. And many of these give you a map view, but it's dependent on having that GPS location embedded in the file. Then you'll have keywords and then creator if known. So if you are the creator of your trip to Europe, you probably want to put that in the IPTC field for creator. If that's not important to you, you may not want to do that. If you know your father took some photos in your library and you want to give him credit, you can put his name in that field. So you can use creator. It's not a required field. None of these are, well, the creator and keyword fields are not required, nor is location and nor is caption or headline. Date created is pretty much a required field because that every file that is generated has to have a creation date. So that's required. Now, copyright, if you're sharing your stuff publicly, you may want to add a copyright statement by indicating who owns that image. So that is up to you. So when you are working in a program and you want to, make sure that your stuff is your keywords are being saved, some methods of adding metadata may or may not get embedded to the file. So again, you need to be familiar with your software programs that you're using, and you want to make sure that you test this out. So add a few keywords to your files, then, like I said, try and export them out and see if they stay. Some ways metadata is stripped away from these files are if you export them and maybe you upload them to a Shutterfly account or Snapfish or Facebook or Google Photos. Sometimes the metadata can get stripped away. Or if somebody sends you an image through chat, texting, or through social media, oftentimes those programs are not required to maintain that data. So you download that file from your phone, from a message that you got from your grandchild, and you no longer have that original creation date. It's all stripped away. Now, the image on the right is from Lightroom. And when I export photos out of my Lightroom catalog, you can determine what fields of data that you want to stay with the image. So I have checked all metadata, but you'll see that there's many other options to pick from, including the 2 blue and white check marks at the bottom where I could remove person information and remove location is the other option. So I could strip away all that personal data before I shared it publicly if I wanted to. Let's talk about some issues that people struggle with often, or at least they come to me with these problems. One of them is having duplicate or inconsistent tags. So again, this goes back to establishing a consistent keyword system. Know which keywords you plan to use and stick to that list. If you want to add to it or change it, that's perfectly fine. Many of these software programs I recommended will allow you to see all the keywords as a list. And in Lightroom, you can actually toggle on and off keywords that a group of photos that you've selected have. And so I find that system very easy to use. So if I had initially tagged photos because of my learning curve, let's say I named a bunch of photos Grandpa. Now, I only had one living grandfather on my mother's side. My father's father died when he was young. So to me, it made sense that if I said this person is Grandpa, everybody should know that that was my mother's father. But if I handed that file now down to my great niece, she would not know that, right? So again, Grandpa is too generic and not specific enough to be a keyword on that photo. Missing or incorrect metadata, again, you want to manually edit the EXIF data in photo software so that it gets saved correctly, and that you can see all your options there and make sure that it's correct, including the date and time on your photos. Some other problems. Well, when I'm managing not only my collection or my clients, managing maiden or versus married names for women is often a challenge. And again, this can be a cultural thing that you need to talk to your clients about or have that conversation with yourself. So I know in some cultures, the woman's last name is kept when children are born. And in some, of course, the woman takes the man's name. So, figuring out how you want to handle the maiden versus married names. The thing that genealogists would tell you is at least keep the maiden name in the woman's ID, the face ID, or in keywords, because if you lose the maiden name in the collection, then it's hard to figure out, what her family background is. So oftentimes people will keep the maiden name and then add the married names in succession after that, especially if she's had more than one marriage, to document all of those families. Now, if you have multiple family names, such as through an adoption or through maybe you changed your name legally, then you may want to keep a keyword based on all of those names. Also, first names versus nicknames. If you've got Francis, and some people call him Fran, and or Bill and William are often, there's so many names like that. Sometimes their name is John, but they were called, their nickname was Jack. So that can be an issue. So you may want to include the nickname in the string of keywords that you identify their name. Aliases or stage names need to be considered. Titles, ranks, and numbers. File names that are too long can also be an issue. So again, I talked about naming people in your library. Use a woman's maiden name. Keyword order. So if you're naming someone, it might be helpful to alphabetize the name by using the last name first, and then underscore, and then put the first name next. And I talk about using proper characters, and I have another slide on that, which I'll talk about next. Dates are another thing to be cognitive of, and make sure that you start out dating correctly. And this would be a date that I would put in a keyword, not necessarily file name. If I was going to put a date in the file name, it would be with the year first. But if I'm putting a date in the keyword, I would use 01-October-2024. And the reason is the other two examples, October 1, 2024 or 2024-10-01, are familiar to those of us that live in the States, in the United States. Many other cultures around and countries, if you had 2024-10-01, that could be misinterpreted to be either October 1st or January 10th. So in order to eliminate the confusion, it's best to put the day first, 01, spell out the month, and then add the year at the end. File naming limitations. So what I don't recommend is trying to describe your photo in the file name. It just gets too messy. You also run the risk of some programs not being able to track that file, especially if you've got a lot of nested folders. Computers can only read metadata up to a certain point, and when the string of data, meaning the name of the folder that it's in, the name of the subfolder, the name of the other subfolder, the name of the other subfolder, then the file name, by the time you have that spread out, sometimes that can cause corruption or an issue with that software. So I highly recommend keeping it short and simple. So instead of using something like 1911, grandfather, World War I, sitting in a bunker, Europe, Carabota, family photos, I would just say 1911, Carabota, Angelo, which is his name, World War I. This is the only photo I have of him like this. And I know that if I searched on either his name or World War I, this image would come up. When I used to teach computers for many, many years in many of my careers, I always would tell people, especially when Microsoft made the change away from 7 characters to allowing people 255 characters in a file name, I used to tell them, just because you can, don't. So please keep your file name short and succinct, and you'll be much better off, and you'll thank me down the road. Again, some further recommendations. If you want to discern between a maiden name and a nickname, or maiden name and last name, use uppercase. That might be an easy way visually for you to see the difference. Avoid all illegal characters when naming files. These are the three that I like to use on a regular basis, and I stick to them. Dashes, underscores, and uppercase. That's it. That's all I use. I don't use the pound sign. I don't use colon. I don't use quotes. I know some people talk about using rounded brackets or square brackets or quotes even. But whatever you use, be sure that you test the program that you're using to make sure that it's acceptable. Read their help menu on characters and and naming conventions. And then export your keyword list so you can refer back to it and share it when you share your library with others. And then when you're naming people with generational names, I run into this a lot where, children are named the same as the father. You can add, in addition to their last name, first name, their date of birth and date of death, especially if we're talking about previous generations to today, and they're no longer with us. It's very easy then to see which James we're talking about, especially if they were not given senior or junior as their name. And then audit your collection regularly. This is something we don't always touch on, but it's important. Now, one of the benefits of having keywords in your library is the ability to easily then generate an album based on a category of words, such as Tom's birthday, or perhaps it's a vacation or a holiday. And I know Mylio can do this. I know you can do smart albums and Apple Photos and whatnot. So it's so fun once you've got a curated library that has all this metadata in it. You can do fun things like this. So if you've got information about these images, and now it's up to you and you want to gather all these images based on a certain event, like a summer vacation, and you want to create a photo book, and you called it Cape Cod Summer Vacation, you could then create a smart album with all those Cape Cod photos, and you could even specify a certain day within a range. So those smart filters are very powerful these days, and allows you to very quickly, gather up those images and create an album, a virtual album of those images for you. So metadata just makes your life so much easier. That's the bottom line. I should just stop right now, but that's it. I mean, it really is mind-boggling how much better you will be enjoying your library when you've got good metadata. So again, just to recap, best practices: use consistent file names, add relevant keywords, don't rely on image 1, 2, 3, 4 to help you logically find them later on. Add descriptive keywords, tag people, add locations to easily find specific photos later, and backup. If we don't back up our photos, you run the risk of losing them. And so we always recommend the 3-2-1 backup strategy. And with that, thank you so much. I hope this has been helpful, and I will be ready for your questions.
Wow, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. I learned some stuff. Everybody learned some stuff. So we're going to get started on the questions to as we go, and I'm looking at our thing here. I'm going to start with the one at the top, just because in an early privacy webinar, it was suggested that we remove metadata before sharing photos. How do we do that?
So depending on the program,
do you recommend they do that? Because I wouldn't. And if you do recommend, or if they do it, how would you recommend it being done?
Right. So this gets back to knowing the software that you use to manage your library. So in Lightroom, I showed you a screenshot in my presentation of how you can remove specific metadata. In Apple Photos, off the top of my head, I don't typically use that to export, but you can take a look and see how to do that. If you're using Mylio photos, they have a very granular export option, which allows you to actually turn on and keep the metadata as you do the export. So it's kind of the reverse thinking. You have to flip a switch in Mylio photos and say, I want to embed that information with the photos, because other than that, your personal information will not get shared, which is nice because they have a feature where you can connect once you, I don't know if we have people doing family trees and genealogy, but Mylio has the ability to connect to familysearch.org. And if you're exporting your photos to that platform, you may not want to export all the personal data that goes along with it, or the stories that you might have captioned with that photo. So Mylio Photos not only allows you to easily connect the people in your library to the family search library and upload photos, but it can also guide you on what information should go along with it. Now, when you upload images to Facebook, again, I would check how those, like I would do a test and I would take a photo from your library that has keywords, upload it to Facebook, and then you download it yourself and see what you're left with. And more than likely, you won't get the personal information on it. You may get GPS data, but I'm not sure you're going to get the rest of it. And if there's a, it's testing really to know what you can and cannot do for your different programs.
Okay, that was a great answer to a challenging question. What is the basic difference between Adobe Bridge and Adobe Lightroom Classic?
Great question. So Adobe Bridge is just a way to look at your library and you can see all your images, you can tag them, keyword them. So it's great for a free program to manage a library of photos. Lightroom takes you up to a whole nother level. You can do editing. You can so you can do contrast editing, a lot of great editing, apply filters to it, and rate them. Well, you can rate them in Bridge as well and do flags, but there's a lot of editing options that go along with Lightroom Classic. So it is a full featured photo management software. It's what the pros use.
And I do know that the photo managers on their website, they have classes, and one of them is about Lightroom. I'm not sure about Adobe. I'm also going to ask Karen Wright, if you're still on, if you could retype your question. You ask, what about date taken? But I don't know what you meant by that. If you'll do that, we're going to go on with the question, and then that way we can get them all done. So I'm confused about dates. Everybody's confused about dates. But anyway, confused about dates. You've talked about EXIF files and date created and capture dates and date created. So what is the difference in all that?
So when you capture a photo, you take a snapshot and you do not edit that photo, all of those fields should be the same date. Date, time, edited, created, modified, everything should be the same. If you go back into that and you add metadata, now it's been modified. Some programs will modify the date modified. Some will have date edited. So maybe you cropped it or you did something else. So it depends on the program that you're interacting with, how it determines what it changes. But typically date created should not change. That's your stable date field that indicates when that file was created on a computer, on a digital device. So if you scan an image, the image scanned will be the date and time you scanned it, unless you use a tool that can allow you to backdate them. So when I do camera scanning, that's how I manage people's physical media and turn them into digital files. And I use a Nikon. So everything comes in as a raw, they call it NEF file. And so in my process, I export them out to a high resolution JPEG. I do auto tone, auto contrast. That changes the date modified on the file. Now, when I'm ready to organize them, I put them into dated folders in Lightroom. And then in Lightroom, I can do what's called backdate and change the date created to the date and time I determine, I'm guessing, for this collection. So if it was taken in 1910, I would say I backdate it to February 1st. That's my date that I tell my clients. February 1st at noon is typically when I start batch dating. I don't pick January 1 because some people, celebrate that holiday. And to have your entire collection keep coming up on January 1 could be annoying. So I don't pick that. If there's a other known event like Christmas, if you celebrate that holiday, that's easy for me to backdate to December 25th of that year. Now I've changed the date created, and the file should reflect that.
Excellent. Excellent. So on a PC, how can you see the date of the photo and tell if it's correct or not?
So in one of my screenshots, I showed how to go into detail view, and there will be date created. And you right click over one of those columns, and you may be able to see also the other values, the other fields that I am talking about. So you may, in addition to see date created, you may have the option to toggle on a column called date modified. But your date created is going to tell you when that digital file was created on a digital device. Now, whether it's right or not, whether it's right or not, only you can decide based on what you're seeing in that photo and where it came from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the hard part, isn't it? That's the hard part. And if
Yes.
you're confused about any of this, one of the things you could do is Google it. I have a PC. How do I see date taken, date creative, da da da? I have a Mac. How do I see date taken? So if you have any questions for Susan, her email address is up there. Please, if you would do us a favor and just hit that little subscribe button and thumbs up if you're on YouTube, that really, really helps us a lot. We certainly hope that this information has enlightened you and helped you understand how to organize and help with your metadata and understanding it just a little bit more so you can do more for later. So Susan, thank you so much for being here today and taking your time. You did a great job. And thanks, audience, for being there. And remember, if you're watching us later on in the recording, you can also put questions down and we will still answer them, even though you're not on a live show. So we're happy to do that, and so grateful that y'all are with us, and look forward to our next adventure together. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you so much for having me present. It's an honor.